So this React video is going to be about React Router, but beyond just the simple route and NavLink or route and link to be able to go back and forth between pages. I want to talk about parameters, and I want to talk about how you can actually make React route to different places without using a NavLink or a link. So we have here my home page, my main component, the app component. My browser router is already set up, and I've got a few different paths. We've got the exact path for the home, then there's the exact path for /kids, and then I'm taking kids where I can pass in a parameter, and then I've got my not found, my 404 error one. The components, you can see there's two components that I'm using here, home for the home one, and then both of these are using kids. The first one, without a parameter on it, I'm saying exact. So this will match if this is exactly the path, and then if it's kids with something else, this path is going to take it. And then at the very bottom, our component with no path, so anything that's not one of these. Inside my header, I have, and the header is being used at the top of both home and kids. Here's my series of nav links. So there's one that goes to home, one that goes to kids, and then one for each of these four parameters, wrapped up inside of a nav fragment, or a React fragment, sorry. So the home page, it just has a header, and then the main with a message, and then the kids, this is where we're going to do all of our work. So take a look in the browser. This is what it looks like in the React Dev Tools, app, browser router, router switch. Here's the route that we're on right now. So only one of these will show up. As we navigate, we'll just see one route at a time. We're on home. If I go to kids, you can see the page changes. So it shows kids as the component that it's now loaded. And if I click on any one of these four, there we have the path is changing, and we're using the path that takes an extra parameter. So on kids, it's the exact path kids, but all the other ones, the exact word disappears, and it's just the other name. So the additional bit of information is being added to the end here. Now, something I do want to point out is that in the route, we have a whole bunch of other information about the route here, including the path, and in the state of the route, there is a match. This match has a parameters object. That right there, kid, that's the value that matches here. So whatever this parameter is, it's going to be put into a variable or a property inside of state called whatever this name is. In this case, kid is Stan. As I go between these different pages, you can see that that changes. So Stan, Kyle, Eric, and Kenny. So we're changing this. We're going to leverage that inside of our kids component. So let's take a look at the code over there. Inside of kids, this is what's rendering if our path is kids, and it's also rendering if the path is kids followed by something called kid, just like this. So these are the paths that we're handling all on this page. I have my main component here, and I've got this thing showing up. This with the class Stan right now, that's what this is showing, this H2. If I changed it to Eric and saved it, there you can see as I move around, this is what the Eric H2 looks like. So I'm going to be changing this. I want to get that parameter from that property that was inside of here. So down inside the router, inside the route, inside of state, we've got match. This is automatically going to be passed through props down to kids. So if I select kids, here it is, there's props. Because kids is the first child of route, it gives us history, location, and match. Inside of match, this is where we find the params, and there's the one called kid. So we need to get this .props.match.params.kid, and that's going to be this string right here, which I'm going to use as my class name for this. So that's our first step. And let's just put this in a variable. So const kid, and it could be empty. We have to bear that in mind too, because if I'm on this, there is no param. So if this dot props dot param dot match dot kid, if that exists, then this is the value that I'm going to put inside of kid. Otherwise, I'm going to put null inside there. Now, null is a falsy value, so I can use that down here. I'm going to do some conditional rendering and say, basically, if kid, then I'm going to render this h2 tag. Oh, put this in backwards here. So this should be props.match.param. There we go. Oh, params. There we go. I'll get this right eventually. There we go. So if something exists, then we're going to render out the h2 element. So I'm drilling down here. My h2 is not showing up. I don't see anything here on the page. But as soon as I add one of these here, then the h2 is showing up. So we're going to change that class right here. Instead of it being the string Eric, I'm going to use the constant kid. Now this will change depending on what we're doing. Okay, so we have some dynamic routing going on here. We have the proper element showing up. Okay, let's go back into our code here. So that part's working. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to add some buttons on there and use these buttons to do routing without those link or nav links that you would normally get as part of the React Router DOM. So I'm going to do some more conditional rendering in here, and I'm going to check to see if kid exists and kid does not equal, let's say, Kenny. Then I'm going to create a button for Kenny. So what these buttons are going to do is, if I'm not on the route for Kenny, then I want to see a button for Kenny. So I can click that and go to the page for Kenny. So we're just going to repeat this for each one of the kids. So one for Kenny, one for Stan, one for Kyle, one for Eric, and then we'll change these labels as well. Okay, so I have 4 conditionally rendered buttons. What did I miss here? Yes, doing conditionally rendered, so I need to have another and at the end of each one of these. So the way this is working is it checks to see if this, inside this expression, we check to see if this variable exists or if it's a non-falsy value. So if it's not falsy, that means I have assigned something to it. Now, if I've assigned something to it, I want to know if it's not equal to Candy. And if that's still true, then I'm going to render this component. So all 3 things in the expression will happen if there's a value for kid and if the value of that is not equal to this. There we go. So as we move between the pages, these are changing, and watch the buttons here. If I click on Kenny, there is no button for Kenny. If I click on Eric, there is no button for Eric. If I click on Kyle, there's no button for Kyle, and no button for Stan. Great, so that's working. Now I need to add the functionality. Now we're going to use the other part of React, which is being able to create a new path. Because this component, kids, is inside of router, or inside of route rather, sorry. Not router, but route. This is a child. That means route is passing down to kids these props. So we used match already to get the params. What we're going to do now is we're going to use history. Inside of history, we've got push and replace. And if you've watched my video on the history object and push state and replace state, that's what these basically are. We are changing the URL here. And React Router DOM already has it set up so that if this changes, it's going to do the rerouting for us. So that's all we got to do is call this method. So props.history.push. And then we need to pass in what the new URL is going to be. Okay, so up here, I'm going to create a method called, let's just call it kidRoute. Pass in the event, and this is going to be called onClick. Right here, we're going to call this.kidRoute because it's a method on our current object, our current component. There we go. Now this method is called when I click on any one of these buttons. I could have just put it on one or two, but I'm putting it on all of them. I could have had different methods for each one if I wanted as well, if there was something different to do. Maybe this means go get an image. Maybe this means go get some data from a server somewhere. We could do anything we want. All I'm going to do is I'm going to change the route. I want to change it to something like this. If I click on the Kenny button, I want to be going to the URL /kids/Kenny. If I click on the Stan button, /kids/Stan. So programmatically doing what the NavLink button does inside of here. You can see inside the header, all these NavLinks have two parameters, and they just point to these new URLs. So we want to do that programmatically. Okay, so I need to create a variable for kid, and that will be ev.target. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the value that's written inside the button here. So that's effectively the text content of this element. So ev.target, that is the button. Text content is the text that's inside the button. And we need to convert it to lowercase so that we get the proper URL, because these are all written in lowercase. The class names that we're using for the H2 here, these are lowercase as well. So we want to make sure that we convert these to lowercase to get rid of the capital. Okay, now we want that method that was inside of here. So inside of route, we pass it down to kids inside of props. Props.history.push. That's the method we're looking for. So this.props.history.push. And then we're going to be passing in kids/ this variable. There we go. Using template strings, we're passing that in. So if I click on Eric, there it is. We changed it to Eric. This changed. The Eric button disappeared. Kyle, Stan, Kenny, Kyle, Eric, Stan. So that works. So that's how you use it. This.props.match.params will give you things that are passed through the URL as parameters, like this. If there's multiple ones, you'll get a property for each one of them. And then this.props.history.push or replace will change what's written up inside the URL. The only difference between push and replace is that if we look inside of here, we'll have all of these different parameters right here, or these entries in the history. If you call replace, you're replacing your current one. If you call push, you're adding to it. And that's it. All right, so hope that helps you out. Hope that helps you understand Router a little bit better and some of the more things that you can do with the React Router DOM. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. If you found this useful, please share it. And as always, thanks for watching.